So I apologize. I
Senate will please come to order. Before I start with devotionals, I just want to welcome back Senator Norris. We'll take a moment of silence to start the day. Thank you. Please rise if you're able for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are there any announcements? Senator from Caledonia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that Senate Rule 31 be suspended and that S301, an act relating to miscellaneous agricultural subjects, not be referred to the Committee on Appropriations.
Now, the senator from Caledonia moves that the Senate suspend its rules in order that S301 appear on the calendar for notice, not be referred to the Committee on Appropriations under Rule 31B. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have suspended your rules in order that S301 appear on the calendar for notice, remain on the calendar, and not be referred to the Committee on Appropriations under Rule 31B. We have, I believe, we will be skipping the referral, of course, now. So now we have Joint Resolution 50 to take up. Please take up Senate Resolution 50. Listen to the first reading of the bill for the resolution.
Resolved by the Senate and House of Representatives that when the two houses adjourn on Friday, March 29, 2024, it be to meet again no later than Tuesday, April 2, 2024.
Now you've heard the reading of the resolution. The question is, shall the Senate adopt the resolution? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you've adopted JRS 50. We have some House bills for reference. The first being H10, passed the House on March 21st. Please listen to the first reading of the bill.
H10, an act relating to amending the Vermont Employment Growth Incentive Program.
Now you've heard the first reading of the bill is referred to the Committee on Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs. We have H289, which passed the House on March 21st. Please listen to the first reading of the bill.
H289, an act relating to the Renewable Energy Standard.
Now you've heard the first reading of the bill is referred to the Committee on Natural Resources and Energy. We have H621, which passed the House on March 21st. Please listen to the first reading of the bill.
H621, an act relating to health insurance coverage for diagnostic breast imaging.
Now I've heard the first reading of the bill is referred to the Committee on Health and Welfare. We have H661, introduced on March 21st. Please listen to the first reading of the bill.
H661, an act relating to child abuse and neglect investigation and substantiation standards and procedures.
Now you've heard the first reading of the bill is referred to the Committee on Health and Welfare. We have H704, introduced on March 21st, passed by the House on March 21st. Please listen to the first reading of the bill.
H704, an act relating to disclosure of compensation in job advertisements.
Now you've heard the first reading of the bill is referred to the Committee on Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs. And we have H872, which passed the House on March 21st. Please listen to the first reading of the bill.
H872, an act relating to miscellaneous updates to the powers of the Vermont Criminal Justice Council and the duties of law enforcement officers.
Now you've heard the first reading of the bill is referred to the Committee on Government Operations. That brings us to the orders of the day. We're going to first go to the second page of the calendar listings to complete the third readings. So we'll start with S58. S58, third reading has been ordered. S58 is an act relating to increasing the penalties for subsequent offenses for trafficking and dispensing or sale of a regulated drug with death resulting. Are there any amendments before third reading? Seeing none, please listen to the third reading of the bill.
S58, an act relating to increasing the penalties for subsequent offenses for trafficking and dispensing or sale of a regulated drug with death resulting.
Now you've heard the third reading of the bill. The question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. Aye. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have passed S58. We now have up for consideration S184 for third reading. It is an act relating to the use of automated traffic law enforcement systems. Third reading has been ordered. Are there any amendments before third reading? Seeing none, please listen to the third reading of the bill.
S184, an act relating to the use of automated traffic law enforcement systems.
Now you've heard the third reading of the bill. The question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, you have passed S184. Because the reporter of S192 is not here, I believe we're going to pass over that for the moment until he arrives.
Mr. President, if I may, I am here.
Oh, sorry. The reporter is here. My understanding is there may be an amendment that is hoping to be offered by a senator who has not arrived. So I've been asked to pass over the bill. My apologies, though, with respect to the reporter and forgetting who reported the bill. We are taking up S258. S258 is an act relating to the management of fish and wildlife. Are there any amendments for third reading? Seeing none, please listen to the third reading of the bill.
S258, an act relating to the management of fish and wildlife.
Now, you've heard the third reading of the bill. The question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for the question? Senator from Rutland.
Thank you, Mr. President. I did read this bill very closely over the weekend, and I have a couple more questions if I could interrogate the reporter of the bill.
Senator from Addison is interrogated as the reporter of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. So Section 1 amends the role and membership of the Fish and Wildlife Board. And if the bill goes through, it will now consist of 16 members, 14 of whom will be appointed by the governor. And the advice and consent of the Senate is necessary. And then 2 at-large members, one from the House side, the Speaker of the House, and one from the Committee on Committees. And in order to be considered for an appointment, a person shall first have to apply in writing for from the appointing authority. The appointing authority will then have to give due consideration to those applying by looking at a person's history with and dedication of fish and wildlife, including a knowledge of fish and wildlife biology, ecology, and the ethics of fish and wildlife management. And a person applying must also provide balanced viewpoints and also recognize the challenges to wildlife and habitat caused by climate change, including an unprecedented loss of biodiversity, and prioritize the value of science in the work to conserve, protect, and restore natural ecosystems. That's correct, I believe. I'm just reading from the provisions of the bill. Then that person will have to receive training from the Department on Wildlife Management and Hunting Ethics, such as the North American Model of Wildlife Conservation, wildlife biology, the coexistence with wildlife, the reduction of conflict between humans and wildlife, and the impact of climate change on fish and wildlife. I believe that's also pretty close to what the provision reads in the calendar. Then in Section 8, there are provisions regarding the transition process. And as I understand Section 8, subsection B, the current members of the board will continue to serve until all new members of the board are appointed or 90 days after the effective date of this act, whichever occurs first. Is that correct, Mr. President?
That sounds correct. I'm just thinking for senators who are trying to follow and be helpful if we could all be looking at the same law. Probably the easiest way to do that is to look at the journal Friday. So if people look at the Friday journal, then the provisions you're talking about appear on transition on page 504.
So my question, Mr. President, is this. Is it possible that, let's say, 50 people make application, but that the governor elects to reappoint the current 14 members of the board? Is that possible, based on the provision in the proposed bill?
It's possible that they would end up as the members, or some of them, I suppose, but we do ask the appointing authority to use criteria in making the selection, those sections that you cited earlier, which appear in Friday's Journal on page 509.
So who would decide ultimately whether the requirements of section 1 sub B, 3, and 4 have been met? Those very criteria that you just referenced. Who would be the ultimate body, if you will, or person or authority to decide whether or not those conditions have been met?
So the page 509, section 4, the appointing authority shall give due consideration to. So it is the intent of the bill that the appointing authority will make selections based on the criteria that are listed, the ones you reviewed, A through C.
But there could be a challenge, Mr. President, I assume, from different folks about who was ultimately appointed and whether those criteria had been met.
Sure, this bill continues current language that we use for appointees. It's already in statute and would continue, and that is advice and consent of the Senate. So there would be an opportunity for senators, I suppose, for the Senate to review applicants and consider their qualifications based on the statutory provisions.
And Mr. President, just one more question if I could. And I believe that I asked the senator on Friday about the training that is required to be offered or to be given, if you will, to those that are making written application. And I understand, although I did not talk directly with the commissioner, that training has not yet been formulated. But if the necessary training called for has not been completed by all who have been appointed, what would happen then?
We don't have a provision for failing to be trained. There is direction. It is shall, directing the department, to provide training. And then, as you pointed out, again, page 509, there's a variety of things listed for the topics to be covered. And as I said on Friday, because of the expertise and experience for the Department of Fish and Wildlife, I believe that if you visit their website and read through, you'll find all the kinds of provisions that are included here as part of their own current programming and ways of talking about managing fish and wildlife, for example.
But if I could, Mr. President, just to nudge it a bit further, we have a 90-day period of time in which that training has to occur from those who have been appointed. And if folks were not available for, that's 3 months worth of time to get the training done. But if someone was not available for a good number of days in that 30-day period, and they did not in fact receive the training by the end of the 90-day period, what would happen to that person? Would they be admitted or not?
So the application and appointment process isn't dependent upon training. It says that once you're appointed, that appointees shall receive training. 509 section C, there's no time specification provided. So appointments, who knows? We don't we're not prescribing that within X number of days, a new board shall receive training in every one of these topics. Practically speaking, I can imagine that when new members came on, it might take a period of time, and maybe it happens in, kind of like going to class, where there'll be at different meetings, you'd have a different section of this covered. But again, it's open-ended and it's to be delivered by the department.
I thank the senator. Thank you, Mr. President.
Question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay.
No.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you've passed S 258. I believe we're now returning to the top of the calendar, which would be H 554. H 554 is read for the first time, referred to the Committee on Government Operations, which considers that the bill ought to pass. The bill is then referred to the Committee on Finance, which also reports that they recommend the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H 554, an act relating to approval of the adoption of the Charter of the Town of South Hero.
Now you've heard the second reading of the bill. For the report of the Committee on Government Operations, the Senator from Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. President. I can assure you it's good to see everybody, and I mean that literally. I'd like to thank you for your warm welcome. Having said that, now on to the bill. H 554 is an adoption for the town of South Hero. Section 1, the voters approved the charter proposal August 1 of 2023 at a special meeting. The vote was 380 to 220 out of 1,200 possible voters. The way I figure that's about a 50% ratio on the votes here. Number 1 is pretty much a boilerplate, which appears in most all charters, referring to the authority granted by the General Assembly. Number 2 is elected officers. Provisions for elected officers of the town of South Hero to be elected by Australian ballot. Number 3 moves to appointed officer positions, where there's 2 positions. 1 is for the delinquent tax collector, and 3 town listers. 3D states the select board shall adopt and revise from time to time the qualifications and job descriptions for these appointed positions. 3C may adopt a job description for the position of town administrator and may appoint this position. Section 4, auditor. The select board shall annually appoint a town auditor who shall perform all the duties of the town auditor as required by the state. Also, the auditor need not be a resident or voter of South Hero. Section 5 is a severability clause. It's a boilerplate provision which appears in most town charters. Section 6, the town may adopt, amend, repeal, and enforce any rule by law or ordinance. Now to the meat of the charter. Number 7, the local option tax. The select board is authorized to impose a 1% local option tax on rooms, meals, and alcoholic beverages only. This differs from many other local option taxes and other charters because it does not cover local sales tax. In case the question comes up, if in fact they chose to take that route later on down the road, yes, it would have to come back to this legislation for approval. C, I think it says C, I can't read my own writing here. Although the town didn't have to, they decided to dedicate the share of the revenues received to use those for property maintenance and projects within the town of South Hero. The approximate monies the town stated in this, not verified, to be roughly $40,000 to the town and $20,000 to the state. And just bear with me. Okay, the effective date shall take effect on passage. We heard from Legislative Counsel, Office of Legislative Counsel, Tucker Anderson, Fiscal Analyst, Joint Fiscal Office, Ted Barnett, Select Board Chair of South Hero, David Carter, and the sponsor of the bill, Representative Michael Morgan. Your Senate Government Operations approved this 6-0-0, and we ask for this Senate support. Thank you.
Bill is then referred to Committee on Finance, which consider the same. For the report of the Committee on Finance, Senator the other senior senator from Franklin County.
Thank you, Mr. President. And we will note that this town is not actually in Franklin County, but it's close. The Committee of Finance reviewed the bill and finds that the financial fiscal effect to the state is not material, and therefore the committee voted to support the bill, and the vote of the committee was 7-0-0. Thank you, Mr. President.
I have a slight challenge here in that we would, well, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for the question? With that being the case, we do have to turn the camera back on for the senator from Rutland, but I would ask the senator from Rutland to not speak on a phone while in a meeting remotely. If you choose not to turn on your camera, you will not be allowed to vote. I think that's probably okay, but I just want to make sure the senator is aware of that. With that, question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you've ordered third reading of H 554. We now vote for consideration S 204. S 204 was read for the first time and was referred to the Committee on Education, which considered the same and recommends that when amended, the bill ought to pass. The bill is then referred to the Committee on Appropriations, which also recommends that when the bill is amended, the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
S 204, an act relating to reading assessment and intervention.
Now, you've heard the second reading of the bill for the report of the Committee on Education, the senator from Chittenden Central.
Good morning, Mr. President. S-204 is a strike-all amendment to what was originally a literacy screening bill. And if you want to look at it, it is on page 1477. I've had to change the page number multiple times, but that's today's number. The ability to read, I don't need to tell you all, but the ability to read is crucial to success in our society. And the inability to read can ruin lives and cost our country hundreds of billions of dollars each year. Growing economic achievement and opportunity gaps pose threats to societal mobility, and reading is a necessity if a level playing field is what we strive for. Today, only about half of Vermont third graders read proficiently, and results are worse for children of color and those with disabilities or living in poverty. How did we get here? A lot of people ask me this. Some blame the pandemic, some blame the ubiquity of screens, but it's also due to the way that reading has been taught. Schools and educators have been manipulated and hoodwinked by reading gurus who claim that learning how to read is like learning how to speak. That with time and the right environment, everyone naturally learns to read. These gurus advocated that with soft lighting and gentle encouragement and access to a lot of books, that kids would just naturally learn to read. It turns out that although some kids do take to reading in this way, many do not. Reading is a neurologically complex task that requires phonological awareness, decoding, and discriminating sounds. A science-based approach to reading is needed for the highest likelihood of success. This bill, along with supporting lots of great scientific-based methods, also calls out methods like 3Qing, where students make guesses about a word that by asking 3 questions. And let me just tell you that this is not the right way to learn how to read. Does the word look right to you? Does it sound right? Does it make sense? This method lacks strategies that a lot of us grew up with, like sounding out the word and using phonetics to figure out what a word means. So we're rejecting the 3Qing methods along with other methods that are similar to 3Qing. In 2022, the legislature took steps to improve literacy with Act 28. That bill created the Literacy Advisory Council, reading, learning modules, among other things. And this bill today is building on that work. So thank you for that. If you want to follow along, you would see that section 1 are findings. Section 2 of the bill outlines the reading assessment and intervention position. Subsection A, subdivision 1, which says that the AOE will review and publish a list of universal screeners. And a universal screener, by the way, is just a short test, kind of like a formative assessment that kids take to see how they're doing in reading. And so that's subdivision A, subsection A, subdivision 1. Subdivision 2 is where we call out specific predictive grade level measures to assess skills such as phonemic awareness and letter naming and letter sound correspondence. Subsection B says that all kids from kindergarten to 3rd grade will be screened. Why do we like to talk about kindergarten to 3rd grade? Because that's when kids actually learn how to read. After 3rd grade, you're using your learning ability, your reading ability to learn. So things change after 3rd grade. That K through 3 period is really, really important. Subsection C speaks to the plans that will be developed when a student does demonstrate a substantial reading deficiency or dyslexic characteristics. So there will be specific interventions and plans to help them get to where they need to be. Subsection D of the bill underscores practices that will be prohibited, like, as I said before, the 3 queuing system. If you go to E, we're talking there about a notification. In this bill, school leaders will be required to notify caregivers within 30 days that their student has a reading deficiency. Part F talks about local literacy plans. G, professional learning opportunities and evidence-based reading instructional practices. We talked quite a bit about that, but we want to make sure that all teachers have an understanding of what science-based instruction looks like around reading. So that's what that's for. H is a report that will be submitted to the AOE by districts and approved independent schools yearly. And I is also a report. The AOE will report to us, the legislature, about what progress they're making. Sections 3 and 4, this is where we move from the screening part of the bill to the AOE part of the bill. So these provisions really came to us from the AOE. And they have to do around caregiver notification and the reviewed reading screeners. Sections 5 and 6, the AOE literacy, this again is more of the AOE part, speak to the development of a comprehensive literacy plan that will impact both public schools and approved independent schools. Section 7 requires that all teachers have some professional development around evidence-based literacy. Even licensed and unlicensed teachers, and I'm not sure if everyone here is aware, but public schools require teachers to be licensed, but approved independent schools don't require all teachers to be licensed. So this part of the bill says that even if you're not a licensed teacher, you need to have some training in literacy. Section 8 requires the AOE to submit recommendations to the Vermont Standards Board for Professional Educators on how to strengthen educator preparation programs, teaching of evidence-based literacy practices, and looks at licensing generally. Section 9, this is where we kind of go back to Act 28, talk a little bit about the Advisory Council on Literacy. And here we're making changes to the makeup of the council. We're going from 16 members to 19 members. We're adding the state librarian to the group, as well as 2 faculty members from approved educator prep programs. And so, for example, University of Vermont has an educator prep program, so they might have someone on the committee, on the council. Also, we're now going to say that the group is going to meet 4 times a year instead of 8. In section 12, We do ask for an appropriation, a very important appropriation, to maintain the literacy position in the AOE. That was something that came to us through ARPA funds. And it was part of the Advisory Council on Literacy. And we think it's really important. If we're going to see all of this work to fruition, we really need that position to be maintained. So that's what section 12 is. Section 13 is a report, and this came to us tangentially from Senator Starr. This is a report to better understand and expand access to early childhood literacy resources, i.e. books, with a focus on options that target low income or underserved areas of the state. In section 14, you've got the effective date, which shall be effective on passage, as you can see. And then after the passage of the bill, the name of the bill will change to an act relating to supporting Vermont's young readers through evidence-based literacy instruction. And the vote in committee was 5-0-0, and we would ask that you concur with our committee. And that's it. Thank you.
Bill is then referred to Committee on Appropriations, which considered the same and recommended that with further amendment that the bill ought to pass. Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Appropriations Committee did agree that this was necessary policy to improve our literacy scores in the state. As per our usual practice, the committee has deferred the question of the position, the conversion of the limited service position to a permanent position, which you will find on section 12, page 1487, and deferring as well the decision on the appropriation attached. So our amendment, as you'll see, calls for eliminating section 12, deferring the discussion on the position until it can be compared with all of the other asks at the end of the budget discussion. Thank you, Mr. President. Oh, and I believe our vote was 7-0-0.
601, but that's
601.
as in the
Thank you.
calendar. So the question is, shall the report of the Committee on Education be amended as offered by the Committee on Appropriations? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have amended the report of the Committee on Education as offered by the Committee on Appropriations. The question now is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Committee on Education as amended? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it. You have amended the bill as offered by the Committee on Education as amended. The question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for that question? Senator from Bennington.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to give a well-deserved thank you to Senator Bulick for leading the committee through this bill. She has worked incredibly hard on it, and I am deeply grateful. Literacy touches all of our committees, and I think our committee certainly recognized and talked about that. If you cannot read and write at grade level and don't advance, you could end up in the criminal justice system. You may not be able to you're less likely able to access healthcare. Certainly in terms of our democracy, government operations, voting, all these things are less likely. So it's not necessarily a sexy topic. Literacy doesn't make a lot of headlines, but it is incredibly important. And so I want to thank the senator as well as the rest of the committee for their work.
Senator from Madison.
President, rise for information. May I inquire of the reporter of the bill?
The senator from Chittenden Central from Education Committee is interrogated as the reporter of the bill.
First of all, thank you for bringing this forward. I'm just trying to understand how two different assessments of student ability compare. So on page 1477, it reports the regrettable situation that roughly half of Vermont students are still at or below proficiency. And then I'm looking at in 1479, subsection C, as part of the assessment, to try to make sure that kids are not being missed that could use more help in learning to read. The threshold for identifying someone is demonstrating a substantial deficit in reading or dyslexia. So can you just say a little bit about the difference between being at or below proficiency versus a substantial deficit?
Could you please repeat that last part of the question?
Sure. On 1479, the diagnostic tests that are going to identify someone as eligible for or needing additional interventions that are in the balance of that paragraph. The threshold is a substantial deficit in reading. And then on page 1477, under findings, it says that we have roughly half of students at or below proficiency. So I'm trying to compare deficit to being below proficiency. And the reason I ask is because if roughly half of kids are in a regrettable situation or being below proficiency, if once you do the diagnostic test, could we end up with a very large number of students who then are identified by subsection C? And then the follow-on question is, are we equipped to respond to 10,000, 20,000 students all needing a special program?
All right, I'll try to respond to that. So we didn't make a direct correlation between all the deficiencies that are out there and the reading scores. The bill started out really focusing on dyslexia, and we decided that we really wanted to expand it to any student who is showing any kind of a weakness, a deficiency, or even a delay. Some students come to kindergarten already reading. Some kids come to kindergarten having never been read to. That does not mean that they can't catch up. They are just starting out at a deficiency. So to your point, yes, you're right. We may identify thousands of kids, tens of thousands of kids who will need interventions. But I feel confident that our system is able to support all of those kids and that we have enough data and research and knowledge about how to teach reading that we will be able to succeed in that task. So I hope that answers the question. And if not, can try again.
Thank you, Senator. And look forward to supporting the bill.
Question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you've ordered third reading of S204. We now have up for consideration S220. S220 was read for the first time and is referred to the Committee on Education, which considered the same and recommends that when the bill is amended, the bill ought to pass. The bill is then referred to the Committee on Appropriations that also recommends that when the bill is amended, the bill ought to pass. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
S220, an act relating to Vermont's public libraries.
Now you've heard the second reading of the bill. For the report of the Committee on Education, the Senator from Bennington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Continuing the conversation, reading literacy. S220 is a bill about improving libraries across the state of Vermont. I think we all recognize that libraries are uniquely democratic. They serve to prepare citizens for a lifetime of civic participation. They also encourage the development of civil society. They provide information and the opportunities for dialogue that the public needs to make decisions about common concerns. They ensure the freedom to read, to view, to speak, and to participate. In short, they are one of the cornerstones of our democracy. S220, senators may recall, stems largely from a report of the working group initiated by Senator Hardy and others on the status of libraries in Vermont and addresses areas for improvement raised by the public and by Vermont's library staff and trustees over the course of more than 2 years. S220 will bolster Vermont's access to information, protect the freedom to read and research in our state, and improve clarity about the governance of public libraries. S220 will also better align statute with the department's current work in supporting the needs of the library community. One issue that emerged in the working group's report is a lack of clarity about the role of public library trustees in effectively managing municipal public libraries. Trustees' roles include establishing policies, managing finances, and supervising library directors. Sections 5 and 6 explain the roles and responsibilities of municipal library trustees clearly. So if passed, S220 would enable library boards to operate more smoothly and with more confidence to benefit the public they serve. The importance of training and continuing education for library staff in our state was a key finding of the working group's report. Currently, no institution of higher education provides training to support library staff in their professional growth. Section 7 would solidify the Vermont Department of Libraries' role in providing ongoing training that supports library staff statewide, including administering the certificate of public librarianship. In keeping with the recommendations of the working group, Section 7 also requires the department to adopt a collection development policy. Importantly, if passed, S220 will empower the department to adopt model policies and to establish best practices and guidelines for public libraries statewide. As the current standards for public libraries were established in 1986, this work is long overdue. Through S220, the legislature can continue to ensure that Vermont's free public libraries, which existing statute declares are essential to the general enlightenment of citizens in a democracy, continue to thrive so that every citizen of our state has access to their educational, cultural, recreational, information, and research benefits. Finally, the passage of S220 and with the adoption of collection development policies rooted not just in the First Amendment, but the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and in Vermont's Public Accommodations Law would establish Vermont as a national leader in protecting the right to read and learn. I'll now take you through the sections of the bill. Sections 1 and 2 have to do with the selection and retention of library materials. These sections propose to amend various provisions of Title 22 in two ways. One, they require public libraries to adopt a policy for the selection and retention of library materials. Policies must comply with the First Amendment and certain federal and state laws. Secondly, the Department of Libraries is granted discretionary authority to adopt model policies governing subjects including materials, reconsideration, and collection development. Section 3, that was sections 1 and 2, excuse me. This is section 3, confidentiality of library patron records and minors. This section proposes to amend 22 VSA 172 to provide that patron records shall not be disclosed except to custodial parents or guardians of patrons under the age of 12. Happy to talk a little bit more about that later in my discussion. That was perhaps the most controversial section. Section 4, criminal threatening at public libraries. This section proposes to amend 13 VSA 1702 to add public libraries to the provisions governing criminal threatening at certain public facilities and locations. Sections 4, 5, and 6 deal with library governance. And then section 7, Department of Libraries. This section proposes to amend the duties and functions of the Department of Libraries to require the department to adopt policies, best practices, and guidelines for Vermont public libraries. The voting committee was 3-0. We heard from a number of witnesses. Happy to share that if people are interested. I just want to return briefly to the section around confidentiality. I'm trying to create an environment where young people can figure out, the way I think about it, who they are in life. And to be able to do that sometimes, there's a lot of misinformation online. There's a lot of hard stuff that kids read that might make them feel bullied, insignificant. We want kids to be able to go into libraries, access information, read it, prevent the sort of bullying and I'd say discriminatory culture that they sometimes feel in American society. And so we thought this was a particularly important provision that kids could go in and sort of just go in on their own, not have their parents be able to access this information. Let them go in and explore and again, take out books, check things out. Yeah, I think that's the best way I can explain it. Some of my more articulate committee members may do a better job, but I'll leave it there. And there is an amendment and that will be discussed by Senator Bueller. So with that, we certainly would appreciate your support.
The bill is then referred to the Committee on Appropriations, which considered the same. And for the report of the Committee on Appropriations, Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Committee on Appropriations did take a look at this bill. We had a discussion about it. We were of the opinion that there was no real impact on appropriations. And so our vote expresses that. We voted the bill out 6-0-1.
So the pending question is, shall the Senate adopt the report of the Committee on Education? But there is an amendment in the calendar. Would the senator from Chittenden Central care to offer the amendment?
Thank you, Mr. President. This amendment to S-220 is being proposed by the co-lead sponsors of the library bill, Senators Hardy and myself, as well as the chair of the Education Committee and Senator Hashim. This amendment differs a little bit from the rest of the bill only because this is pretty specific to schools as opposed to public libraries. The rest of the bill really dealt with public libraries. This puts a focus on school libraries. As a former school librarian myself, I relied very heavily on our school libraries' material selections policy, as well as a reconsideration procedure. A material selection policy, what is it? Well, it includes criteria to guide in the resource selection process. So it lays out, what are we looking for in this library? What kind of materials are we going to be gathering in here? And what is appropriate or inappropriate for this school library? The criteria enable library staff to select materials in all subject areas and formats. In addition to criteria such as appropriateness to the age and the level of the user, librarians must also consider creating a collection that reflects diversity of ideas and authors, as well as being reflective of the population that the library serves. A reconsideration policy or procedure is what steps need to be taken if there is a complaint regarding an item in the collection. So this amendment isn't saying that a book or a material can't be taken from a library or removed from a library. What it says is that there is a procedure that needs to take place before that can happen. This amendment would require school boards and approved independent schools to adopt, enforce, and make available a material selection policy and reconsideration procedures. These policies and procedures would prohibit the removal of library materials for the following reasons: partisan approval or disapproval, the author's race, nationality, gender identity, sexual orientation, political views, or religious views, a school board members or member of the public's discomfort or personal morality, political views, or religious views, the author's point of view concerning the problems and issues of our time, whether international, national, or local, the race, nationality, gender identity, sexual orientation, maybe I already read that. Okay, political views or religious views of the protagonist or other characters in a book, or content related to sexual health that addresses physical, mental, emotional, or social dimensions of human sexuality, including puberty, sex, and relationships. And subsection C of the amendment just states that the policies and procedures under subsection A ensure that school library staff are responsible for developing collections. And that is the amendment. And we voted 3-0 on that. Thank you.
Before I move on to the statement of the question, I just want to point out a slight Scribner's error on page 1492. It indicates that a new section is being added, 17A. That should just read 7A, and we will take that as a Scribner's error. Question is, shall the report of the Committee on Education be amended as offered by the senator from Chittenden Central and others? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay.
Nay.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have amended the report on education as offered by the senator from Chittenden and others. The question now is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Committee on Education as amended? Are you ready for the question, Senator from Chittenden North?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm a big believer in literacy. but also grammar. I would draw your attention to page 1490, section 6, section 143B, where we see the board shall consist of not less than 5 trustees, and I wonder if this is a Scrivener's error as well. It should be corrected to say no fewer than 5 trustees. Thank you, Mr. President.
So I'll take that as a point of information, in which case please remain standing. The citation that you are referencing is actually current law. So in order to change that, it would actually take an amendment as opposed to being able to make a reflection as a Scrivener's error. There would be third reading tomorrow if one wanted to offer an amendment, but at this moment, we cannot take that as a Scrivener's error.
This will be
Thank you.
the one. Thanks.
Question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the Committee on Education as amended? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have ordered third reading, you've amended the bill as offered by the Committee on Education as amended. The question now is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for that question? Senator from Addison.
Thank you, Mr. President, and apologies to the full body for creating a grammar monster on the floor with lesser and fewer. It is my pet peeve, but I didn't realize there were so many times in the statute that it came up. But I rise actually because I love libraries, and I'm like kind of a library nerd and passionate about libraries. And I just want to, at the risk of annoying the senator from Orange, I want to thank the Committee on Education for taking up this bill and then also for improving it with the amendment that we just passed. As many of you know, libraries are under attack nationwide, and reading and books are under attack nationwide. You yourself, Mr. President, have pointed out the number of book bans that are happening nationwide. And I am thrilled that we here in Vermont are standing up against that trend nationwide and protecting our libraries, improving our libraries, and ensuring that that youth and kids and adults of all ages have access to appropriate and life expanding reading materials through our public libraries. They are the heart of so many of our small towns, and they are crucially important on so many levels. The Status of Libraries Task Force did an incredible job, 700-page report on libraries. If you want to see it, I have a bound copy of it, and just did some incredible work pointing out how important libraries are to our state. So thank you to the chair and the Committee on Education for this bill, and I'm glad to hear the Senate supporting it. Thank you, Mr. President.
The question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay.
No.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you've ordered third reading of S-220, Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. As senators no doubt know, we are scheduled for a joint assembly in just a few minutes. So I will let the body know that it's the intention, when that rather short session is complete, to come back here and continue our work for a period of time. So please, when the motion is complete, stay by your chair ready to go. And then when the session is complete, please come back immediately to the chamber. With that said, I would move that the Senate stand in recess until the fall of the gavel.
Senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate stand in recess until the fall of the gavel. Are you ready for the question? Senator from Chittenden Southeast.
Is it appropriate to make a short announcement?
The motion was not made with announcements as part of it. It is a direct motion, unfortunately. The senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate stand in recess until the fall of the gavel. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and the Senate will stand in recess until the next fall of the gavel.